the sound of cars going to be okay?
Not a problem.
Don't do it again.
The mics will be good. All right.
Sorry.
And is everyone ready?
Are you ready to
Good?
go?
Okay, and then you just start with your name, title, spelling,
My name is Jeff Greenwalt, Jeff Greenwalt as in Tom, and I'm a lieutenant with the Austin Police Department over the homicide and aggravated assault units. I appreciate everybody coming out today. We did have 3 murders over the last 24 hours, and we're here today to talk about those murders, give a little bit of a synopsis of each one, and ultimately elicit any information from the community that might have information on these murders to assist in our investigations. Want to address each one of them at a time and find out if there's any questions on that specific murder before we follow up on the next one to make sure there's no confusion between the different cases that we're talking about. The first homicide we're going to talk about is labeled as number 31, and it did occur yesterday, Wednesday, August 26th at approximately 2:46 p.m. in the 6600 block of Janes Ranch Road in southeast Austin. We received multiple 911 phone calls about a disturbance in the street, and while officers were en route to the disturbance, it updated to shots had been fired and that there was a victim with a gunshot wound. We were able to locate the victim on scene, who has been identified as Derek Amorico, a 51-year-old white male who was pronounced deceased. Another person was also transported with less severe injuries. All of the people involved in this particular situation have been identified and are known to each other. It is a domestic disturbance dispute that we're investigating, and right now we're basically sorting through the details of the witness statements and the evidence to determine whether or not an arrest will be made. There is a claim of self-defense, and that's what's being investigated at this time. We are staffing the case with the district attorney's office and trying to determine the best course of action once we get all of the evidence in the witness statements. We do want to ask if there's anybody in the community or in the neighborhood who feels like they have information about this case or was a witness to this case to go ahead and reach out to us. The tip line for the Austin Police Department Homicide Unit is 512-974-TIPS. If anybody wanted to reach out at that number, they could do so. They could also just go through Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous as well. Does anybody have any questions about that specific case?
Can we get the spelling and the name of the victim after this is done with, just to make sure? Okay.
Yeah, we'll send that out.
Okay.
That's the one that happened by near Onion Creek in South Boston?
Yes. Yes, down near McKinney Falls. Okay. Homicide number 32 happened late last night, early this morning at 6th Street in Brazos downtown at approximately 12:30 in the morning. We received multiple 911 phone calls about a disturbance. There was dozens and dozens of people who were fighting in the middle of the street downtown. And while we were en route, that one also updated to shots fired. And when we arrived on scene, we were able to find a white female who is, as of yet, unidentified, who was deceased. She was transported to the hospital and pronounced deceased at the hospital. We have a few witnesses identified, but we know that there are several more witnesses who were there. We do know that this stemmed from some sort of a dispute between 2 different groups of hurricane evacuees, one from the Port Arthur area and one from the Beaumont area. We don't know the exact cause of the dispute or what started it. We're still investigating that. We do want to speak to all of the witnesses that were out there and saw and heard what occurred. There are numerous witnesses that are yet to be identified, so if anybody feels like they saw or heard something, even if it was after the fact or heard somebody talking about it, we want them to also reach out to the Austin Police Department Homicide Unit. Again, our number is 512-974-TIPS, and you can also reach out to Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous if they'd like to. I know there were some questions that a lot of people had about what hotels they might be staying at and whether or not it was gang related. We're still identifying all of the people involved, so it's a little early to say whether or not it was gang related. And there were numerous different hotels throughout the Austin area that the evacuees were using, so there's not one particular hotel that was really in question.
How many people did you say were involved?
In the initial argument and physical fight, it was between approximately 50 and 60. It was hard to say exactly. And then when the shot was actually fired, handguns were actually produced by both sides. One person on one side and one person on the other both had a handgun, and shots were fired at that time. And they actually didn't shoot the person they were aiming for. They shot an innocent bystander. The person who was deceased, by all intents and purposes, had nothing to do with this. She was just standing at the wrong place at the wrong time, and they shot and killed her.
Now, do we know what prompted this group to meet in that area? Because 50, 60 people at 12 o'clock in 6th Street.
What they are doing there and what caused the disturbance is still part of the investigation. We want to know the answer to that too. So again, we encourage, if any witnesses know the answer to that, to please come forward and let us know.
Any idea of how many shots were fired?
We have that information, but because we're still investigating it and identifying witnesses, that's one of the things that we won't release at this time.
Has anyone been arrested?
Nobody's been arrested in that case.
If there was one hotel mentioned in the press release, a Dreeski, can you confirm that at least what that name was there? You said they didn't know what hotels that they were staying at.
There were numerous different hotels, and this is what the information that they gave us at the time. We haven't had a chance to verify it with the hotels yet.
So we don't know if they were actually staying there, that this just happened in front of there.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any more questions?
The woman who was hit in that case, it's been said that she was a homeless individual, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know where she was hit?
We have that information, but we don't really release information about specific injuries or anything like that.
So you have some witnesses. Do you have any persons of interest or suspects?
We have a lot of information that we're sorting through, and we're continuing to try to locate the people that they are naming, but we're just trying to sort through a massive amount of data, and I think that there were some people who were in really close proximity to when it happened, and we think that a lot of those witnesses actually know these people by name. Trying to identify the people who are not from the Austin area poses unique challenges. So the people who came with that group or might be familiar with them, we really do want to talk to them.
Well, and obviously those groups aren't from here, so what efforts are you doing to make sure that you can still contact them and have those assurances that you'll be able to reach them should they need to?
The cooperative witnesses, it's really easy. They're providing us with contact information. There are some people we're having to go and track down, and we're working together with the local law enforcement agencies in Beaumont and Port Arthur as well to make sure that there's somebody there that has information or anything that could assist us. We're working with them as well.
Go ahead.
Do you all plan to ramp up patrol in that area at all? Since it has been pretty active since evacuees came down here?
If we find out that there's going to be a lingering problem, I would say that would absolutely be something that we look at. I think a lot of the people are heading back home, and I don't think that there's going to be a problem here.
Do you have any indication that the people involved may have already left?
Some of the people who were involved have already left. But again, there were dozens and dozens, so we're just kind of sorting through how many.
Do you guys have Halo cam or surveillance cam video of this?
Yeah, we're trying to identify as much surveillance cameras that we have. We do have Halo cameras in the downtown area, and we're trying to put all that stuff together as well.
Did you recover any weapons?
Specific case information like that we don't release in the first few days, sometimes weeks, because we're still identifying witnesses and what they say. We want to make sure it's because they have good operational knowledge of the case, not something that they saw on TV.
We'll take one more question on this one.
Do you work with any shelters to try to identify the woman? I know you said she's yet to be identified. What are you doing to try to make sure that you find out who she is?
We have a host team who works with the homeless population here in Austin, and we're reaching out to them. Ultimately, we use fingerprints to identify somebody, so the identification won't be a long-term problem. It's just that because she didn't have anything on her immediate person, it's just presented a little bit of a longer process for us. Okay, the third murder that we're going to talk about today is number 33, and it happened last night at 10:48 p.m. in the 2100 block of Elmont Drive in an apartment complex parking lot. We received multiple 911 phone calls about shots fired. Upon arrival, we were able to find a 21-year-old male who was pronounced deceased at the hospital many hours later. And initial information on this particular case is still coming in. We know that there was many people involved in this particular disturbance. We don't really know what it was about, but what we do know is that these people are known to each other or loosely acquainted with each other. They're not evacuees from out of town. They are local to the Austin area. We still want to talk to as many people who know about this case as well. If there were witnesses who saw what happened or heard what happened or talked to anybody that was involved afterwards or saw something on social media or heard any rumors about what happened, we encourage them to call us at 512-974-TIPS, or they can go through Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous as well. There's a lot of unknown circumstances with this particular case. A lot of people had left the scene prior to our arrival, so we're still trying to identify all the people who were there and find out what the motive was for this particular case.
Was this in the mesh apartment?
It was in the 2100 block of Elmont Drive. I don't know the name of the apartment complex.
Okay.
Lieutenant, just kind of an overall question. Council has scrutinized some of these grants that APD would be taking and using. One of them got postponed to next week. That's the Project Safe Neighborhoods Grant, which is targeted enforcement in Riverside and downtown. Interestingly enough, those homicides, a couple of them, one in Riverside, one in downtown. So would that kind of targeted enforcement have prevented something like this from happening, and if so, how?
I think it's impossible to say conclusively if that would have prevented something, but anytime you put more marked patrol officers in an area, you're going to see a deterrent value. If a marked patrol officer had rolled through Sixth and Brazos 5 minutes before they pulled their guns out, chances are they wouldn't have pulled their guns out.
Last question?
So yesterday in the press conference, I believe they said there were 4 shootings that happened yesterday. We just talked about 3 homicides. Was there another shooting or something that occurred yesterday?
I don't have that information in front of me, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
And, if y'all want, we're gonna do Spanish